I'm John Batchelor. My colleague and friend Gordon Chang is with me as my co-host. He's at WMAL, my affiliate in the nation's capital. And we're very pleased to welcome our colleague Peter Navarro. He's a business professor at the University of California at Irvine. Most importantly, he's the producer of the documentary Death by China, which is just out now in DVDs for everyone. Peter, a very good evening to you. The U.S.-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue, gosh, that's a mouthful, underway in Washington.
We're call it a failure, John, for sure.
Yeah, right. Painful lunches. Good luck. John Kerry earns his money. Well, leave that outside. We have a new Secretary of State and a new Secretary of Treasury. They're sitting with their opposites or equivalent if China had a real government and not a dictatorship. A lot of other cabinet officials and Chinese state leaders are gathering, and we look to the economic issues. Peter, is there a profound change from the last time there was a Chinese gang in Washington to meet with the Obama administration? Because the recession is now apparent. China's failure of exports is now apparent. Are the Chinese dealing from weakness now, Peter? Do they know it? Good evening to you.
I think that's exactly right, John. I mean, a year or two ago, they were rubbing our nose in the fact that we had a financial crisis and a housing bubble and all sorts of problems, and now the shoe is very much on the other foot. China is grappling with a tremendous slowdown in their economy because after basically killing our economy in Europe, they can't depend on exports anymore. At the same time, they have a real estate bubble, which I think is going to make ours look small when it finally collapses. And, you know, my concern is that this new leader, he's kind of the Hollywood-type leader, the handsome guy with the famous wife, looking westernized, but everything he is doing is in line with the old kind of Maoist hard line, and this does not bode ill when we sit down to talk with them.
Gordon?
Peter, well, first of all, congratulations on the DVD. That's really terrific. More and more people have to hear this and have to see it.
We're trying to get that message out, and Gordon, you do so well in the film. I want everybody to see you in that film. DeathByChina.com is where they can get it.
Terrific. One of the things that I think we've got is that the Chinese, because they've got so many problems at home, have been trying to close off their market to American companies. And their most recent tactic is to use these price investigations, using their anti-monopoly law against our companies. But this really is just another theme because we've had so many ways that they have tried to actually get our companies, keep them out of their market. Isn't that true?
Yeah, in economics we call this a classic non-tariff barrier, and China plays really, really well. They play really hardball on this. They investigated Apple for alleged prices too high. Basically cracked down and put pressure on them to keep their factories in China rather than bringing them back home. Now the baby formula thing is just exquisite in terms of the humor and irony, because here we have a situation, Gordon, where the Chinese companies making the baby formula have put melamine, which is a deadly chemical, into that, killed babies, injured thousands and thousands of babies. The mothers in China don't trust it, and then sure enough, we have a run on all the baby formula from the foreign companies that are importing in there. Of course, prices are going to go up. It's the risk premium you pay, and what does China want to do? They don't want that to happen, so they're cracking down on these companies, putting pressure on them, and the companies, unfortunately, are kowtowing to the Chinese government, and they're actually lowering their prices.
Peter, Gordon and I discussed a week ago, I believe, the green movement in China. And he knew, and I did not, but I learned, a gutter oil, which is cooking oil that people scrape up from the gutter in China and use again. There was a new twist, however. Gordon, this was a surprise to you. Leather milk. Have you ever heard that term, Peter?
I have indeed. And actually, in the Death by China book, I wrote about gutter oil some years ago, and it's the most disgusting kind of thing. It's the cardboard they put in their jousabaus. It's just, I mean, anything for a buck. That's the problem we as consumers over here have to understand when we buy tilapia or shrimp or apple juice or garlic or anything that's imported into this country from China. These people in China have been raised basically in a regime where anything goes, and they'll put anything in a product to save bucks, and it winds up poisoning people. They just don't care. And the leather milk, I mean, it used to be just melamine you had to worry about in the milk and the baby formula. Now it's this other thing that they call leather milk, which is just too bizarre to comprehend.
Yeah, as I understand it, they take leather or pieces of cow and cut it up into the milk to raise the nutrition test or the protein test whenever it's given. Is that right, Gordon?
Yeah, that's a safer way to do it. By the way, that's exactly why they put melamine in the baby formula, because it gives you a false read on the high protein content, and the milk is priced on the level of protein. So at least people won't be dying of kidney failure. They'll just be ingesting old leather from God knows where.
Gordon, is that the sort of conversation that can come up at this meeting between John Kerry and his opposites?
Well, it should, but I don't think that it will, because there's so many other things that they need to talk about, things we've talked about earlier in this show. And yes, this is important, but just there are so many important issues now with China that I think that it gets pushed to the bottom of the pile.
Peter, the recession, or what appears to be a recession, Gordon, wouldn't you call a downturn in exports a minus number, a recession anywhere else?
Yeah, well, certainly it is. And this just surprised every economic analyst. It even surprised me. And I'm not an optimist about what's going on, but I actually thought that there would be a positive export number. But instead, it turns down 3.1%. This is really stunning.
All right. My question, Peter, is does this make China more dangerous now that they're desperate?
Of course. And you know why exactly. It's because anytime there's trouble domestically, the Chinese government has a well-established history of creating an international crisis, whether it's with Japan over islands or with us over Taiwan or whatever. And here's what really bothers me about the current situation right now, gentlemen. What we're doing, John Kerry is the Secretary of State, President Obama back in 2011 when they announced this whole pivot to Asia and creating a kind of a military plan to contain China. Okay? All well and good, but what really annoys me is that they will not deal with the fundamental issue which would be most effective at containing China, which is cracking down on their unfair trade practices like currency manipulation. Right now, the Chinese government and its military is fed by those unfair trade practices that push us to buy as consumers these products that are underpriced. And by the way, John, I hope you saw that story where the Metropolitan Transit Authority of New York City did, you know what they just did? They just took the bid for Chinese steel to basically renovate the bridge that goes over to Staten Island.
Chinese steel? Do they not know the story?
It's amazing. The MTA guy, I think his name Tom Fenziker or something like that.
We just have 30 seconds. Go ahead, Peter.
Basically, New York City just outsourced.
But you saw the controversy you saw the controversy in San Francisco, the Bay Bridge. The first accusation when there was failure of the rods was Chinese steel. They had to prove that it came from Ohio. They had to prove that the failure was American before people would trust them again. And now we're bringing Chinese steel to America.
Yep, longest suspension bridge in North America, historical landmark, going to be made in China.
Peter Navarro is the business professor at the University of California at Irvine. He's the producer of, now ready in DVD, Death by China, which is also available online. You can see it at the website, Death by China. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com at the nation's capital, my affiliate WMAL. I'm John Batchelor.